male allyship and how we can better see women in our homes and workplaces. So there's no better guest, I don't think, to venture into the world of live streaming than the one and only Ian Wright, founder and CEO of the Disruptive Innovators Network. So, Ian, it's lush to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
And very well, and thank you for inviting me along, Crystal. What a great series you've got. I'm sure this is one of those ones that's going to be picked up by Netflix at some point, the idea around it. So, yeah, delighted to be here and share some thoughts with yourself.
Oh, Netflix, if you're listening, you're very welcome. So, yes, I wanted to dive straight in, Ian, because you're known for all things around innovation in housing, and how we can sort of shift the dial in the housing sector. And, for me, one of my big passions is, all things sort of gender equity. And I know it's a really big place to start. But I did want to ask you, sort of like from your vantage point, why you think taking that like gendered lensed approach matters for sort of the social housing sector and for innovation in the sector.
Yeah, I mean, get straight into it with a little tough question like that, Crystal. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a number of ways you can sort of look at this. I mean, for me, sort of, equity isn't about treating everybody the same. It's about actually giving people the access to it. It's because not
Mm,
everybody wants to front something. Not everybody wants to do, the same as everybody else around that. But that sort of equality of access is really, really important. And I think certainly from a gender perspective, when you talk about innovation, where do people's minds go? Well, they'll probably think about all the tech bros out in Silicon
mm.
Valley and things like that, and Zuckerberg and Sam Altman and all of those sort of things as well. And it does sort of feel like, oh, this could potentially be quite a male-dominated sort of industry, but that is just one small part of it in terms of sort of the technology side of it. And innovation in itself, has many different elements to it. And I think, like anything, if you're trying to do something, you want as many voices as possible. And I always sort of, come at these things from a point of view of, well, what did the dissenters say? When you're trying to solve
Mm,
something, what did dissenters say to make sure you get that right? And I think this is where, when you have got a good gender mix in a room, you can actually start to get some different voices and different perspective on things. Now, that's not
mm,
to say that, one is right and one is wrong, but it's about understanding and I suppose developing your decision making abilities. I mean,
yeah.
you obviously you worked at a very senior level in the sector for a long time now, and you will know how hard it is, particularly when you have to take a decision that affects people's lives, livelihoods, their
Mm,
homes.
mm,
You feel the burden of that. And I
mhm.
think this is where, as I say, we sort of, can learn from different voices about, well, this is how it's going to affect me. Because sometimes it's very easy to not hear the personal stories in how, we're taking decisions. You might, just look at something and say, oh, well, actually, that's just some numbers on a spreadsheet. When in reality, you're talking about people's jobs, you're
Mhm.
talking about people's homes, their neighborhoods, all of those sort of things.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that sometimes like the most innovative solutions that we can um, come up with, sort of in terms of problems, are all come back to just like understanding the human behind the issues that we're trying to solve. And I think through my like See Her campaign, I've been hearing time and time again just stories, loads of stories of people's experiences, and those stories bring in such like a richness to helping aid understanding, and then from that understanding building a solution from there, as opposed to sort of seeing a problem on a page and then using our own sort of limited knowledge or data to solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I mean, for me, data has never sold me anything. It's the stories that sell you things, and
Mhm.
I still think we make a mistake when we're trying to sort of influence or we're trying to change people's mind. That we'll put numbers up there or we'll put charts up there, when really the bits that sort of really change it are people's human stories.
Yeah.
What impact did this have?
Yeah. I'm becoming obsessed with data in the sector, honestly. It's so funny like whenever I go along to conferences and things, it's always like the data and the AI program that seems to be more and more well attended, and people are really, I think, interested, but also feeling like maybe being more data focused or even data led in our decision making is going to solve all of our problems. And that fills me with fear, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm not like a data person. You know me, Ian. Like my background is in homelessness, it's in housing management, it's in the people side of this industry. But you know, data is such a big part of becoming such a big part of the sector. And so I've had to like lean into that and really understand like, okay, what are the benefits of, being more using more data in our work, and especially AI. Like ChatGPT is my best friend. I use it all the time. But I I do worry as I've begun to like dig into the whole data AI piece a bit more around how it just seems to potentially perpetuate biases.
Mm.
Um, and I've been asked this in my presidential role. Like, do you think data will help or hinder us when it comes to creating a more equitable world? I want to know what you think. What would your answer to that question be?
A more equitable world. Well, look, if you stand back from it, right, how do you get data? You get data by doing something. So therefore,
Mm,
data is always a lag response. If you don't do something, you don't get data. So it's historical. It's looking back over. And I think traditionally we probably have been in a world, I mean, when I was at school and college and what have you, you didn't have people rushing off to go and do double statistics, did you? It was, we want PE or we want to blow something up in a chemistry lab. And I think it's very similar that the situation that we're in now. Data is not the new oil, right? It is not. But what we do have to do, and I think this is part of, I suppose, what we talk about is what are the new skills of leaders going to have, is our relationship with data in terms of we've got the
mm,
value it. And I think we've been in the position whereby everybody trusts the data that's gone in is of a really good quality and stuff like that. And actually, it isn't. And I think this is where AI will start to fall down. That if you don't really trust your data, why would you let AI help you make a decision on that if the data is not good? I mean, as I said, DIN is an innovation sort of network, and we spent a long time coming up with a formula for AI, which I think will help anybody who understands this, which is the formula was AI plus BSD equals AS. And excuse the fruity language, but it's for artificial intelligence plus bullshit data equals artificial stupidity. And
I
I
love
think
it.
I think part of the challenge you're going to have is, we are going to have some stupid leaders out there because they're just going to accept, what AI is sort of telling them around that. So I think there are some sort of risks out there. But I think the other thing is, in all seriousness around it, is be data informed, but don't be data driven, right? Okay,
Mm,
data does not have empathy. People have empathy. You've got to keep that. The data can inform you, but the story and how you put that across has got to be delivered by people, by the humans around that.
yeah,
Otherwise, what we
yeah,
do is we just risk turning people off and not achieving what we want to achieve.
yeah, yeah. I think the more I've sort of dug into this, the more I've learned how we have so many data gaps. So we haven't been collecting data very well, not just the housing sector, but society at large forever. So, data collection's been really patchy. It hasn't always aimed to accurately reflect or represent the people from whom it's collecting the data. So women are so often missing in the data that's out there. This is well known in terms of, well, everyone now seems to know about the car crash dummy testing that's not done on women, but it's prolific in health. There's just a complete lack of gender data in health. And I think that's where my worry comes in. You'll often see a data set like the tenant satisfaction measures, and you'll think, oh, well, that's an accurate reflection. of our tenants, and then you think, well, do we know that? Do we know that for sure? Because, like, yeah, are we confident enough that it's accurately representing um, who it's meant to? Because then if
Well,
it doesn't, you've got a massive, yeah, a,
yeah.
a massive risk, right?
Well, I think this is our relationship with data over sort of many years, and again, it's what we were brought up in, and I think how many times, it's worth sort of looking backwards. We do a lot of work with sort of on strategic foresight, futurism,
Yes.
and looking forward. And if you want to understand what the future is going to look like, you've roughly got to look back twice as far
Mm,
as what you want to look forward. So if you want to look forward 10 years, you've got to go back 20 years and look at the trends that sort of shape that. And how many times have we had to correct things that we saw as fact 20 years ago,
yeah,
which are no longer true now?
yeah,
I mean, you imagine if uh, um, I don't know if you're around about sort of my age, but I mean, I grew up in the age whereby we had adverts on a Mars a day helps you work, rest, and play. Um,
yes,
you know, yeah, exactly. You try and put that advert in now, and it's a Mars a day helps type 2
yeah,
diabetes and obesity around that. Our sort of view of the world has changed, and there'll be other things as well that come through. But you're right. I think we rely on a lot of outdated methods, and I think this is where you know you know everybody's responsible for this challenge to say, right, okay, where is this data provenance come from? Where is the transparency? And how do I know that what I'm taking this decision on is basics? So one of the things we are fond of is averages, and this is usually
mm,
your point about how you treat people, as an individual. If you go off averages, that's not good, and people's expectations are changing now. I want to be treated as an individual. So one of the things I always ask leaders is when they've been collecting data on their tenants and residents is great. You're getting all this data around it. So give me 3 examples whereby tenants and residents are benefiting but from more personalized services as a result of this data that you've got from them. And people really
mm,
struggle with that. And I
mm-hmm.
always go back and say, well, look, you've collected this personal data from people, but you're not actually sort of doing anything useful with for their benefit.
No, no, it's so true. And if you work what I call with the statistics at the margins, the outliers, if you're curious enough to go there and think, well, that's a detractor, isn't it, from the statistics? It's a detractor maybe from where we want to be. That's where you're going to get results. And this isn't just housing. Well, actually, this is quite a big topic in homelessness because you can say, oh, actually, we haven't got this huge issues in housing and homelessness in England as we do in other parts of the world. But actually, if you take that curious approach and you go to the margins of the data, you see that's some of our housing situations are and homelessness situations are um, horrendous and so much worse, than you find elsewhere. But because we work in this world of averages and generalisms, we lose that. And for me, it's heartbreaking because then I think, but you lose the people, um, and you don't really understand as well as you could do what the personal experiences are like of people who aren't showing up in your generalized, um, yeah, data databases.
Well, I mean, look, in your line of work, I mean, homelessness is a very, broad sort of spectrum around it, and
Mhm.
it's not just not having a roof over your head. Homelessness impacts on lots of other sort of areas and your whole sort of personal well-being thing, and yet we seem to lump it all together around this. I mean, coming back to your point about biases and what we sort of have there. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sort of getting to the view that artificial intelligence is neither artificial because it's created by humans, and it's not really intelligence either. It's
Mm,
not intelligence. It doesn't have that capabilities yet. But what it does do, it does have those biases built in.
yes.
And I just wonder, are we going to see more of this come out? I mean, if there is a disproportionate number of men who work in the code an IT sort of sector building these things, is it likely that those biases are going to come out in the results what AI is sort of going to show us?
Yeah, brilliant point. I mean, how do we like so if those biases are there, and look, I'm an optimist, okay? So I
Mm.
think there is a solution out of this. But yeah, so if we know that those biases potentially exist now and could exist in the future, what could we do to start eliminating those biases from the data um to make the data more useful for when it comes to creating sort of gender equity and better services, I suppose, for women?
Yeah. Well, I come back to one of my earlier points. You've got to do things to get data, and you've got to sort of build that sort of things from scratch. So if you are using historical data, that's probably not the best thing if you want to design something new. And I think this is where we get into some of the um, principles of sort of corporate innovation, which are very, very different to running a business on a day-to-day job. If I sort of just explain, there's two elements the way you run a business. There's the exploit element, which is basically the business as usual, which is you make what you do even more efficient. So
Hmm.
you're doing your incremental improvements all of the time around that, and that requires being more efficient, more effective, less discovery. It's right. Okay, we're going to concentrate on this. But if you need to solve a problem to which you don't have an answer, you move into what's called the explore phase, and this is
Mm,
where we have some challenges, because the explore phase involves a lot of uncertainty, i.e., I don't know what's going to happen because we've never done this before, we've never built this before, we don't know what timescale, how long it's going to take us to sort of solve this problem, and we don't know what the return's going to be.
mm,
And if you're an organization or you're a leader under pressure, you're more likely to say, well, actually, we haven't got time to wait for you to discover that. Let's just stick with what we're doing. And this is where we get into, I suppose, one of the theories that we like to sort of push within DIN, which is the competency trap that we have. And the competency
okay.
trap explains why I think some organizations won't change, because actually the risks of doing something new, something uncertain, something that has an unknown payback period, are less than just staying in an imperfect system. We know this isn't
Mm,
working very well. We're not necessarily giving the best service, but actually that is less risky than doing something completely different. And it's quite a hard mindset, Crystal, to sort of get
yeah.
into, isn't it? If you're running a big organization and you've got shareholders or you've got board members or you've got regulators, if you say to them, well, look, I haven't got a clue whether this is going to work or not because I'm in the explore phase.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're operating in a highly regulated sector as well, um, yeah, that does become a challenge. I suppose it comes down to that sort of the push-pull factors, doesn't it? Because
Mm.
um, yeah, I think so. One of the things that I'm really keen on is the regulator and the ombudsman putting more of a focus on equality, because what gets measured gets done. And I think that could become a push factor. So when it comes to, right, we're going to try this new thing that we've not done before and it's a bit risky, but we know that the end result could be that we'll do better at achieving that thing that we're regulated against, then that might pull people in that direction. And I feel one of the challenges that we have at the moment is that who's bothered if the housing sector is equitable? Who's bothered? Who's monitoring that?
Yeah.
So, you know, yes, we do equality impact assessments because there's a duty to do. There's legislation around it. You might end up in an employment tribunal if you're really upset, like somebody with a protected characteristic. You might. It's hard to get to an employment tribunal. You might end up with a complaint at the ombudsman, I suppose, and they might find that there was a bit of discrimination there. It doesn't happen that often. So where's yeah, who's focusing? And it's so sad to say that, because you think, well, we are social housing providers. We should want the best for people. But we're not measured on that. Nobody's holding us to account on gender pay gaps. Nobody's holding us to account on whether our Black and minority ethnic tenants are more or less satisfied than our general tenant population. Nobody's holding us to account on whether our female tenants are more or less satisfied than the general population, because we don't publish the data in that way. And I do just wonder if there was more of a push really for the sector to be more social, shall we say, in its purpose, then that would encourage the sector to take more risks and be a bit more innovative, because we're not generally doing that. I mean, there's some fantastic organizations, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush. There's some fantastic people and organizations doing some brilliant things, but we do have huge issues around equity in the sector, and I just wonder, like, what's going to be the push to get us there. And I do feel like it's an innovative approach that's needed, which is why I wanted to chat with you. Like, yeah, where will that innovation come from? What does it need? I suppose, what will it take to get us there?
Yeah, I mean, innovation tends to come. I mean, sometimes innovation is sort of overused as a word. It's probably a little bit out of fashion at this moment in time, but basically, it's just something that new that adds value or solves a problem. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. And in answer to your question, if people don't see equity, inclusion as a problem, it's unlikely they're going to want to invest a huge amount of time, money, or effort into some innovative sort of solutions around that. Having said that, your point about social housing is spot on. People don't come into social housing, unless they agree with what its social purpose actually is. And if you think about it, I can't think of a better sector, perhaps other than perhaps being a midwife, whereby you give somebody a house and they can turn it into a home. That is a real gift that you've got the
Yeah.
ability to sort of do. But in answer to your question, in my experience of nearly 40 years in the sector, unless something is mandated or regulated to be done, it simply won't happen. And what you will continue to do is to get organizations who, because of their culture, i.e., this is what we do around here, will do it on an individual basis. But unless it's part of that organization's DNA, it
Mm.
simply won't, because otherwise it's seen as a cost or people can't see the value. But this is where we come back to the earlier point about, actually, you've got to be able to tell the stories as to why it matters and what difference it will make, and make it very personal to the people who get there. You
Yeah.
know, you've probably heard the man on the moon story, the NASA, the guy sweeping up in the
Mm.
what you do, and I'm helping put a man on. If we went to somebody in housing, in social housing, and said, "What's your purpose within this business?" Would they be able to tell you? And I think this is where Din does a lot of sort of stones in the shoes of leaders by looking at some of the publicly available information that's out there. I like nothing better than going and look at housing organisations' websites, picking up the corporate values, and then playing them back to them. And you'll be amazed how many times, if I read them out, they'll say, "Who's that for?" And I'll say, "Well, that's your organisation."
Dearie me. Oh, crikey. I think we could go down a rabbit hole, Ian, and I don't want to go there. But what I do want, where I do want to go is to the question that this podcast has become a bit famous for, actually. I get stopped at conferences with people wanting to give me their answer to this question. But the podcast is called If I Had One Wish. So if you had one wish, it has to be one, for the housing sector, what would it be and why?
I think my one wish would be that realization that how lucky you are to work in a sector, as I said, that can do so much good for so many people. Right? There are so many people who uh, don't have the advantages that we have about how you can impact so many people's lives, and you will know this from your career in the sector. You remember that moment where you give somebody the keys to their first home, to a new home, to a bungalow, whatever it actually might be. And the joy and the satisfaction and the impact that that can have is extremely hard to achieve anywhere else. And I think my one wish would be that the sector realizes what it is like to actually do that.
Mm.
And uh, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that, if think about the language that we use in social, it's almost impenetrable for somebody coming inside. Yeah, well, we've got X number of voids. What's a void? What's a big hole? No, it isn't. It isn't. It's an empty home. It's an empty house. It's empty property around this.
Mm.
And we seem to be good at putting up barriers to people to really understand what we do, and then we wonder why we sort of struggle with that. So I think my one wish was to sort of actually just realize there is huge value in working in businesses that have a social purpose. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. And, in a world where it can feel really dark out there sometimes, speak to people and people are maybe feeling a bit sort of hopeless around, where we're at as a society and how you can have a positive impact and make things better. I agree with you. I don't think there is any other sector apart from maybe health, where you can get up every day and give someone the tools to change their lives and to make their lives better and to build better communities. And I do think, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees in that. We lose the perspective around the impact we can have.
Yeah, and I think an important bit that we sometimes sort of forget, is the word trust.
Mm,
And trust, you only get trust via a series of kept promises.
hmm.
And if you work in an organization, a housing organization that says things but actually doesn't do what you say you will do, people will lose trust in you. And we can see this across all different areas of society and institutions to this day. We have lost trust in those organizations. And I think the good landlords, the good housing providers are the ones that understand that and design their systems, use the technologies to ensure that actually when we say we're going to do something, that is exactly what we mean. We know things go wrong, but for the most part, we'll deliver on what we've said. And then people will talk about you in a different way. They'll say, actually,
Mm,
whenever I phone them up or I get in touch with them, they always do what they say they're going to do. And I'm sure you can reel off any number of organizations who you like engaging with, buying from, because
yeah.
actually you know what you're going to get from them. And can we
Yeah.
say the same about sort of housing landlords? I don't know.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Ian, it's been lovely to speak with you. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights. I think the work that Din does is disruptive. Great fun. There's always cracking food whenever you come along to anything. But I think it's so important that we have organisations like yourselves who are putting a bit of a spotlight on the sector and encouraging us to to think a bit differently. So thank you. Thanks for being our live streamed guest. And everybody who's tuned in or who is listening to this back, you have been listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast.
Thank you very much for
Thank
inviting me along, Crystal.
Thanks.